Hi, and welcome to my suffering. Hi, I'm Horror Queen Cosplay, and I spent a year playing every single Call of Duty main campaign on veteran mode. Why did I do this to myself? Honestly, I don't know. I am the kind of gamer slash person who always says that you should play in whatever difficulty you want. If you want to play a game on easy mode and just relax, please by all means do that. Don't let anybody shame you. And if you want to play something on its hardest difficulty and you enjoy the challenge, heck yeah, it doesn't take away anybody else's experience of enjoying a game or being a gamer in general. I have played plenty of games on easy mode like The Evil Within because I just want to have a good time. And then there's plenty of games like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 where I have beaten the arcade game on its highest difficulty with every single character on my original PlayStation 3 copy. It just depends upon what you're looking for in a game or how you want to play and where you get your enjoyment from it. Last year, in 2023, I dipped my toes into Call of Duty, kind of initially as a joke. I had seen all the memes and TikToks and cosplays and stuff around Ghost and Soap and Koenig for the Modern Warfare 2 reboot/remake, and I made a joke to one of my friends who plays Call of Duty regularly and said, I don't want to actually spend money on it, maybe, I'll play the campaign, and it was gifted to me. And I said, well, I'm just going to play the campaign, and that's it. I'm not going to play multiplayer. I don't really enjoy playing multiplayer games like this. I used to play Overwatch 1, and I was a Mercy main on day one. I just don't have that left in me anymore. I just want to enjoy myself. Well, that opinion changed. I enjoyed it a lot. Did several cosplays. I am planning several more cosplays. And I just really fell in love with the story and the characters, and just, for some reason, I wanted to challenge myself. I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and just see what it's like to play this game on veteran mode. And I ended up having a good time. And I went, well, what if I did it with all of them? And so, over the course of a year, I did just that. I spread it out, of course, so that way I could prevent burnout, played other games in between, took breaks often when I was frustrated, but your girl did it. And in order to let my suffering have something good come out of it, why not make a YouTube video talking about my opinions and experiences with each and every single one? And hopefully this will be entertaining. For starters, aside from the disclaimer I had at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be changing my outfit, wig, hair, makeup constantly during this video because this is 20 years worth of gaming history, and I just did not want to sit down and record everything all at once. I wanted to take my time also with the recording and release of this video. I am currently recording this. This first video is starting off in March of 2024, so this is well before any sort of inkling or notion of what the November 2024 release is going to be. So pretty much we're going to be going from Call of Duty 1 2003 all the way to the Modern Warfare 3 reboot that came out last year in 2023. These are all just my opinions. I'm probably going to have different opinions than a lot of people because I didn't grow up playing Call of Duty. And it's not that I didn't enjoy FPS games or that I didn't grow up playing games in general. They just weren't interesting to me, and I didn't really know that they actually could contain interesting stories and interesting characters. Don't get me wrong, I love my FPS games. BioShock is one of my favorite games of all time. I have a tattoo of The Lighthouse. I love Borderlands. I love a lot of FPS games, but this just didn't really appeal to me until recently. And I'm very much the kind of person that story and characters usually come first when I'm picking out whether or not I want to try a new game, and then it comes down to visuals, and then it comes down to mechanics after that. that's just what is important to me and where I get my joy out of games, but I am also somebody who doesn't like to limit themselves in what type of games that they play. Anytime I'm recommended something, I try and give it a chance, especially if it's something that I normally don't play, because I do think it's very important to consistently step outside of your comfort zone and outside of the box of what you would normally pick up, whether it be a movie, book, TV show, games. It's important to explore other genres that you normally wouldn't. Try things out. Again, it prevents things from feeling burnt out or feeling stale. And it's just good to take breaks and cleanse your palate a little bit. I did notice a significant improvement in my FPS abilities. I used to make jokes during my Twitch streams, which, excuse me, I'm being a little bit lazy and using my streaming software to record this because I just did not want to deal with my regular camera. It has been bothering me lately that I usually use to make YouTube videos, and my better microphone is attached to this, so we're just ignore the live chat pictures. But I did notice that there was a significant improvement in my abilities. During my Twitch streams, we used to joke that, like, oh, Horror Queen's aim is really bad, she gets performance anxiety, she's so much better when she's not recording. And then I started pretty much putting myself through the ringer with this game, and now I actually really, not to toot my own horn, but I'm actually okay. I love using sniper rifles. They're now my favorite, and they used to be my least favorite. My accuracy's pretty solid. I typically have at least a 1 or higher KD ratio in multiplayer. So before we start diving into each individual game, let's talk about how this video is gonna go. We're gonna go by order of release, starting with, of course, Call of Duty 1 2003, rather than the order in which I played these games. If we had done that, yes, it would make sense for how I've maybe shaped opinions about some of these games, but it would be all over the place. So we'd be going from the remake of Modern Warfare 2 to the original Modern Warfare 1 to Ghosts to Infinite Warfare to it would be all over the place, and I just don't think that would make for a cohesive and good video. To keep it scientific, we are going to be doing things as standard as possible, so we are only going to be talking about veteran mode, rather than realism mode, which some of the later modern titles added as a notch more difficult than veteran mode. We're going to keep it standard with just whatever was labeled veteran mode. For most games, that is the most difficult one. And additionally, we are only going to be talking about games with PC campaigns. So of course we're going to be throwing out Black Ops 4, which does not have a campaign. And a few of you who know this franchise are already going, well, wait, how can you say you've beaten every single Call of Duty on veteran mode and da-da-da? I have. Here's some clips of me playing a few of these. This unfortunately leaves out Call of Duty 3, which I couldn't really, at the time of recording this, couldn't really find any super concrete research as to why it never got a PC release. It's the only mainline one that didn't get a PC release. And according to Reddit, they just ran out of time. If you want to believe Reddit can always be taken with a grain of salt. I'm going to post the link in my description below for you to take a look at that. But it didn't. But you can play it on the Nintendo Wii, so alright. And of course, there were 2 that were portable only. Call of Duty Roads to Victory for PSP, and Black Ops Declassified for the PS Vita. Yes, I played them. Yes, I own them. Yes, I own a PSP and a PS Vita, but we're just not going to include them in this video because it's not fair for me to start comparing controls and the way a game feels when it's not even on the same system as the rest of them. Same thing for Call of Duty 3. I also feel like I don't really have much to say about any of these. Call of Duty 3 is going to have a lot of the same notes that I have for Call of Duty 2, which is it being an improvement from the previous title, the studio coming more and more into its own, getting more and more of that Call of Duty brand and identity. It's another World War II story. Call of Duty 3, It's just that same thing with Roads to Victory. It's another World War II title, and Black Ops Declassified is meant to go in between Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, but of course you can kind of still vaguely enjoy Black Ops 2 without playing Declassified. I say vaguely because Black Ops 2 was not one of my favorites. Yeah, I know I'm probably... Yeah, which leads me into my next one. I'm gonna have opinions that you may or may not agree with. I'm going to hate games that are your #1 nostalgia fave, and love games that you really, really hated, vice versa. So keep it chill in the comments. By all means, tell me about your Call of Duty experiences, which were the first ones you played, which ones really meant something to you, good memories, have you also played these games on veteran mode, what are your opinions, but also note that these are my opinions. Not all of the footage that I'm going to be showing you guys are from my vet mode plays, because some of you might say, oh, that looks a little too easy. That's because I didn't get the idea to do this video until I was a quarter of the way through these games, and not all of them I did not want to go back and replay all of them. I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Some of these were a lot more difficult than others. So, yeah. And finally, if you're coming into this video for some quick tips on how to handle these games on vet mode, let me just lay down the law here. For me, the way that I handled a lot of it, other than taking breaks often, and if I found that I was really, really stressed out and like repeating the same 5 seconds over and over again for 30 minutes, taking breaks definitely helped me clear my head. Trying out new tactics or ways of approaching or timing something, obviously that would help a little bit if I felt like I was getting stuck, but you can say that for any sort of game. Using cover, going prone, or crouching often did help a lot. A lot of my gameplay is me just like laying down or hiding in a corner, so that's... Sometimes not all my recordings are winners here. Also, additionally, actually following NPCs and letting NPCs do their jobs was really great too. I know Call of Duty, it kind of thrives on that way of making you feel like a solo badass, but if you actually stick with your NPC companions and let them get kills and let them help you or give callouts, it can be really helpful for veteran mode, that is for sure. And obviously there are going to be some NPCs that are more helpful than others, which I will talk about. So thank you for letting me lay down what's going to be going down here. I hope you enjoy this video. And here we go. Wow. It begins. Let's talk about the first one and dive on in with Call of Duty, the original 2003 title. I mean, it kills me to start off this video with probably one of the most painful ones out of this entire experience, but why should we be just surprised? 2003 game design on its hardest difficulty that is designed to make you cry. It was a time. It truly was a time. I mean, brutal doesn't even really begin to cut it. This is the one Call of Duty title that does not allow healing at any point when you play on veteran mode, which pretty much means that it demands absolute perfection. Don't get me wrong, a lot of Call of Duty titles are very similar when you play on their difficult modes, but not having any healing is brutal, to put the least. I'm gonna keep repeating that word. This game did define FPS shooters, so I did appreciate playing this game from a historical game design standpoint, as well as somebody who does love and appreciate studying history, taking a look at the ways that video games can portray certain aspects of history. They really did a lot of research into weaponry and just general warplay. As a whole. Granted, of course, they're not going to talk about the true horrors of war. That is not the nature of these games. This isn't a horror title like Ad Infinitum or a commentary title like Spec Ops: The Line, which came from criticizing the way Call of Duty portrays war. We're not really going to be diving into too much about that video. This title really showcased, during this time period, 2003, how video games can really take cinematic techniques from film and really make the medium flourish in terms of storytelling, player experience, and pacing. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a 2003 game, but it runs beautifully on pretty much every single platform, even if you have something like a GameCube title as well. It has aged fairly well. For me, I got a sense of nostalgia playing this game with its crunchy graphics and sound design, because it reminded me of when I discovered Half-Life when I was in college. I have very fond memories playing the Half-Life games instead of doing homework and writing essays. Sorry, Mom and Dad, if you're watching this. But despite having never played Call of Duty prior to last year, the fact that this game still gave me a sense of nostalgia for older titles was quite nice. I mean, there's really not much to say except for how incredibly difficult it is. It follows an American campaign, a British campaign, and a Soviet Union campaign. So you do get a variety of different characters and stories and pieces of World War II, as opposed to later Call of Duty titles that focus more on one character solo campaign or one primary character with an occasional secondary character's missions or stories slided in. This was its original formula, and it's quite solid and quite enjoyable to play. Do I recommend playing this game on veteran mode? Dear Lord, no. Please have mercy on yourselves. Please. I think it took a little part of my soul, to be perfectly honest. Wild. But this was the first game from Infinity Ward. They were the initial developers, creators of Call of Duty. Obviously, as the games go on, we get more developers, studios in play, helping out, but this is Infinity Ward kicking everything off. I do really appreciate the fact that this is the first time we ever see iconic characters such as Captain Price, as well as a few other character names slid on in. And I do love that about the Call of Duty franchise, is that even if they decide to rework a character, they still will pull from very old titles to do so, and it's quite enjoyable. Yes, this is a completely different Price than we see with the modern take done by Barry Sloan, or even the original Modern Warfare series, but it's still quite delightful to see one of my favorite characters in the initial game. I let out a gasp of shock and surprise and delight when I found him with my crew. It was great. I mean, I was not expecting him to sound posh and very British, but it was still wonderful to see him and see the roots of this game. Another thing I really do appreciate about this franchise is that each and every title of Call of Duty feels like a time capsule for that year of gaming history. The way that games were designed, the technology behind them, general attitudes around gaming can be perfectly encapsulated with that particular year's Call of Duty title. Or at least FPS titles. I don't want to make a huge generalization, especially as the gaming industry has grown and we look at more recent titles within the past 5 years. Still, it feels like taking a look into a piece of the past, a 20-plus-year-old piece of the past. I did also appreciate a lot of the dialogue out of this game. Some of the characters caught me off guard with how sassy they were. The AI is still quite functional and very helpful. I was very impressed because I have played titles that are not even 10 years old and had insufferable AI. Characters that felt like they didn't really help me at all. So it's still a very solid game. While yes, this game does remind us the beauties of modern game design with certain shortcomings such as the lack of healing, or just how if you play on veteran mode, all of the enemies are going to immediately focus on you, ignore all of the other AI, and you're gonna get shot down in 2 hits. But it still is a delightful title regardless. Again, I would probably rank this as the most difficult to beat on veteran mode. It's a time. So, yeah. Moving on, it's time for Call of Duty 2. Now, a lot of my notes about Call of Duty 2, as stated prior, really can be repeated for Call of Duty 3, so I know we're going to be skipping Call of Duty 3 for this video, but just note that a lot of what I have to say about Call of Duty 2 can be repeated for Call of Duty 3. This was a 2005 release done by Infinity Ward once again. This was before they started implementing the once-a-year Call of Duty releases, and you can really see how much the studio has grown within those 2 years. This is the first time not only do we get healing in vet mode, huzzah! I was actually surprised by how quick the recovery time felt to heal yourself back up. It didn't take as many hits for me to die in this game. It felt a lot more balanced just in terms of damage dealt both by me and by NPCs, and healing and overall game design. I felt like I actually stood a chance with this one, as opposed to the original Call of Duty. It was still incredibly difficult, but a smidge easier. This one, once again, just like the original Call of Duty, featured 3 campaigns of the American, British, and Soviet Union. They kind of interwove them a little bit more, rather than just like, here's a chunk of this one, here's a chunk of that one, here's a chunk of this one. It just feels like a nice step forward and improvement upon their very cinematic wartime hero formula that they had already implemented with the first Call of Duty game. The cutscenes also felt incredibly improved. We had a storming the beach of Normandy iconic sequence. The characters felt a lot more fluid in motion. They didn't look like silly little army guys like the toys in Toy Story. Again, just an improvement in terms of game design and technology as a whole. We still had our sassiness to our characters, which I appreciated. We got to see Captain Price again, this time in some khaki shorts. I don't know why, I mean, yeah, you rock those shorts, Captain Price. It's very tense, had good action, not just for the year it came out, but again, even playing it 19 years past its release, I was still quite riveted by this title. The NPCs have very good callouts when it comes to grenades and other enemy locations, which very refreshing for, again, a 2005 title. I've played other titles where NPCs are not nearly as helpful. And this is one of my big pieces of advice for playing veteran mode in Call of Duty is listening to the NPCs and letting them do their jobs. Don't rush ahead of them, stick with them, let them tell you where enemies are, or throw back grenades, or let you know that a grenade is coming. Have them help you pick off enemies. Unlike some later titles, they will consistently give you back fresh recruits every time you lose a few, which feels so callous when I speak this out loud into words, outside of just talking about video games as a whole, but this game definitely gives you a bit more of a fair chance in terms of veteran mode. Is it still incredibly difficult? Yes, it is! Definitely on the higher level of difficulty, but I felt a little bit better about this one than I did the first Call of Duty game. You can see little nuggets and pieces of modern Call of Duty experiences or elements in this, but in its early budding state. Again, going back to my stance earlier and stating that these games feel like a time capsule. And honestly, it just reminds all of us, not just Call of Duty players, that there is still joy and value in replaying and preserving older games, learning where we came from, learning how games are designed, what works, what doesn't work, taking a look at evolution of games as a whole. Preservation is incredibly important. Thankfully, Call of Duty is a well-preserved series. You can still regularly pick, it's still very easy to pick up console titles of these games and have them function if you have a fully functioning PS2 or GameCube. That most of the games, pretty much all of the games except for the PSP/PS Vita and Call of Duty 3 titles, are available on Steam and other modern consoles or just abilities to play other venues to play games. They re-release a lot of titles consistently. The original Call of Duty was re-released and ported to PlayStation 3 when Modern Warfare 2 came out. The original Modern Warfare game was re-released with Infinite Warfare. It's not hard to get your hands on these games, and I really, really do appreciate that, and it can't be said for a lot of older titles, even ones that aren't as old as the Call of Duty franchise. Oh, I did prefer this one over the original Call of Duty and Call of Duty 3 out of the original trilogies, even though I appreciated the portrayal of Price in the original Call of Duty more. This one was definitely the most enjoyable to experience out of the original trilogy. Alright, it's time to talk about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, or Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1, whichever way you want to talk about it. This was a game that changed the entire franchise. Initially released in 2007, also again by Infinity Ward, this was our first time not doing a World War II campaign. We once again get back Captain Price, but he's a little bit gruffer and rough around the edges. Ooh. We get the introduction of Sergeant John Soap McTavish. Tragically is a silent character throughout the game, such is unfortunately the trend of FPS games at that time, where the player character is meant to be essentially a blank slate for the player to place themselves into and feel more connected to the game. Tragic, because you're gonna have a character named Soap McTavish, not let him speak. RIP. We also get to see Gaz as well for the first time. This was truly a wonderful game. Quick side note, all of my footage and my gameplay for this was from the 2017 remastered version of the game, despite me also owning several clear console copies of the original. This is one of the most widely distributed versions of Call of Duty. You can even play it on the Nintendo DS, which is absolutely wild. You get so many iconic memes out of it, such as the "We Are Leaving." It is a fantastic and solid game. This was technically the second Call of Duty game that I played out of the entire lineup. I had started my Call of Duty experience with the reboot of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and moved into this one just because I was curious about the other titles. It's gritty. It definitely reflects that PlayStation 3 grit as opposed to almost how not squeaky clean or polished that the PlayStation 2 games had felt, but PlayStation 3 really kind of was that edgy, hot topic, gritty teenager, let's face it. Speaking from somebody who was an edgy, gritty, hot topic teenager growing up. Don't get me wrong, this is still a tough title in terms of veteran mode. All of them are. And there were certainly some sequences that made it a little bit more difficult than others. This is one of the few titles that I actually had to look up, hey, is there a trick to beating this game on veteran mode? Because certain parts, like getting into the barn multiple times, and dealing with the All Gillied Up mission on vet mode were tough. No, there's so many wonderful and iconic pieces of this game. The All Gillied Up mission is fantastic. First time we really get to see stealth in these games. I loved the sniper rifle in it. It gave you several options as well for gameplay. IGN has a wonderful video talking about this mission alone. I highly recommend it. I'm going to be linking that as well as some other really great YouTube videos talking about the Call of Duty franchise in case you guys wanted to look up more interesting stuff about these game series and how they were developed. It has a brutal ending to it. It is really the start of what has made Call of Duty stand out and be special. And when you think of Call of Duty, you often think of the Modern Warfare franchise, whether it be the original or the new versions. They're fantastic. You really get to see this game flourish in terms of interesting characters. At the end of the game, you do also get a special mission that is unlocked after the credits that feeds into the later story. It feels odd and mysterious at first, and it especially is very different considering the last few titles were all World War II and didn't really need or have that sort of an overarching story or mystery to it. Little teaser for what the franchise has in store for you later, and I appreciate that. Despite going into this game knowing a lot of the larger beats and certain character deaths and like who main villains were, it still was intriguing to sit here and go, oh, what was that? Overall, it's a very wonderful and enjoyable experience. It is one of the few that I would recommend absolutely trying to play it on veteran mode. Yes, you do kind of have to get a little bit tricky with certain pieces. When it came to the all gillied up mission, I looked up somebody else's YouTube video where they pretty much told me to hide in a certain corner and try and trick the enemy AI a little bit with certain movements, but hey, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. It's overall a very solid title. Is this a title that I would recommend be somebody's first Call of Duty? Maybe not necessarily, but it is still very interesting. It's very war specific. Unless you're really into war specific actiony titles, it might not be something that interests you, unlike later titles that I think are easier at bringing in non-Call of Duty fans or non-war actiony FPS fans. It still is a very solid experience if you are starting to get more into Call of Duty and you want to dip your toes into some of the earlier titles. And again, it's really interesting to compare this initial version of the SAS/141 characters as opposed to their later, more modern versions. It's not too far off and different, but yeah, the first time I saw Gaz, I was like, who are you? That's not who I'm used to. Even Price is a lot more ragey and rough, tough military man. But such is that time period's version of game design. Alright, here we are. Treyarch is here with the 2008 Call of Duty World at War. Now, I want to say nice things about this game. I really do. This game and I were not friends. We were not kind to each other. Once again, we are back in World War II. I wouldn't call this game a step backwards, but I wouldn't exactly call it a large step forwards. I know a lot of people are extremely nostalgic for this game. A lot of people talk very highly of this game. I, however, do not have that nostalgia. This was not one that I particularly enjoyed playing. I will admit it was a time for me. This game also is the first time you get to see a zombies mode, which I don't really have plans to talk about the zombies modes of these games, but if you guys really want me to, I can certainly make a later video going through all of the zombie modes and stories and such of all the Call of Duty games. Please do let me know. Well, we went back again to World War II. We went back to having multiple campaigns. We had an American and a Soviet Union/Russian campaign. Frankly, in my opinion, I felt like the American campaign was quite boring, and I would have rather they had just stuck with the Soviet Union/Russian perspective, but I can see why they split through the two. We get to see different aspects and sides of the war, such as the American versus Japanese side of the war. It was... I mean, it feels silly to say, man, this was a violent game when this is all Call of Duty, but man, this felt like extra egregious in terms of violence. It's that time period of PlayStation 3, brutal, violent video games. it opens up with a literal bang that just had me go, oh my, it almost felt like I had to clutch my pearls there. And again, I'm no stranger to violent or gory video games. I am a horror game lover. I don't have any problem with that, but this one still took me a little bit off guard with certain elements of the violence. It's odd to put it fully into words. I was speaking with some people on my Twitter account, and one person remarked that it almost felt more like shock value than just, oh, that's very standard war Call of Duty violence. I know a lot of you are probably going to disagree in my dislike of this title. I totally get it. You are welcome to your opinion. This video is meant to be my experiences and my opinions. This was just not one that I particularly enjoyed. Partially, I'm sure, is because this was one of the last few ones that I played, and I had already been really impressed by all of the Modern Warfare titles. I had already been impressed by the Black Ops titles, so this one, when you compare to some of the larger titles in the franchise, it's a little bit difficult to measure up. And again, I can totally understand nostalgia. Playing this for the first time when it first came out, I'm sure was absolutely special. This is one of the clunkiest ones in terms of movement and buggiest titles, which is a bit of a shame, but it happens. The NPCs, for the first time, actually felt very useless and often got in my way. I was unable to physically move the NPCs, so there were a couple moments where I would be in a corner doing my own thing like I usually do for vet mode, which is cowering in a spot where I feel like the enemy can't get me very well and shooting out of cover very often and taking long moments of rest and breaks to heal. And one of my supposed allies would come in, box me into that corner. I couldn't move them because they're trying to, you know, cuddle with me in the corner, I guess, and a grenade would come and they wouldn't move and I couldn't move because they were blocking me. So then I would die because of a grenade because my teammate wouldn't move there out of the way, which was exceptionally frustrating. At least in this one, friendly fire wasn't as heavily punished as some of the other titles. Call of Duty 2, I did not mention this earlier, was exceptionally brutal in punishing you in terms of friendly fire. If you hit one of your friends or allies with just one bullet, the game would be like, oh, that's it, reloading your quick save. I'm like, please no. Combined with just general World War II issues of, oh my god, everybody's wearing the same color and looks alike, and I can't tell who's the enemy or not. We also didn't have a tutorial opening, which is very unlike Call of Duty as well. The earlier titles would always start you out with like some sort of a training course tutorial. Totally fine. This game pretty much is saying, hey, you're probably not picking this up unless you know FPS games or Call of Duty in general. That's pretty much the vibe of the way this game's approach is. It's not really trying to bring in newer players. It's sitting here going, we know why you're here. Let's get going to the killing. This was actually the first time we got to see Reznov, which was very, very delightful for me. Just like Captain Price, Reznov is a character that is later utilized. I won't talk about his later utilizations in the franchise. You will just hold your horses. We will see him later. But as somebody who played his later titles before playing this one, it was kind of like, oh, hello, old friend. Even though this was technically our first time supposed to be meeting each other, Reznov is one of the best things out of this game. He is a delightful and wonderful partner character to have. I say that when he is also so bloodthirsty. He craves so much destruction, which, I mean, considering what he went through, fair, but his dialogue and voice acting is very wonderful and is truly one of the best things out of the game and is part of what made the Russian/Soviet Union sequences far better than the American ones. The American ones felt like just the very basic, ooh rah, we're heroes, whereas the Russian ones I felt like had a lot more to say. This was the first time that like the Russian characters were portrayed slightly different than say the Americans. They were very brutal, almost, my notes literally say revels in the slaughter. That's literally what I wrote down in my notes. Take with that information what you will. This game did try to pose a moral question during the Russian campaign where where they had captured some NZs. I don't want to say the actual name because I don't want YouTube to slap me with that ban hammer just in case. And they were like, ooh, should we, you know, have mercy on them and just keep them as prisoners, or should we just murder them like they've been murdering all of us? And one of the other characters was like, oh, it feels like it's too much to be doing that. And Reznov's like, well, you know what I want, what I think, just it's your choice. And I'm sitting here going, are we really gonna have a moral sequence about whether or not I should take out some Enzies? Really? We're really gonna do that? Maybe it's just me and my love of choice-based games. I've played so many different types of choice-based games under the sun, from Telltale and David Cage, oof, games, all the way to Life is Strange and a million other choice-based and quote-unquote morality-based titles. BioShock is one of my favorite game series ever. So I just kind of sat there and I went, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, but they're Enzies. So... bang bang! Again, this is, 2008 game design. The fact that there was even some sort of a thing like that, I appreciate that attempt, but I also just kind of sat there and I went, really? They're Enzies. It's not really a question. No, we're not gonna pull the, we'll be just like them. No. Is this, for all of the good things that these games do showcase in their eras of game design, they can also, unfortunately, showcase a lot of the bad aspects of their year in terms of game design. This was a very boring color palette, very muted, grungy colors. It just wasn't nice to look at. My eyes definitely struggled with finding certain things and enemies. It's just that time period of PlayStation 2/3 era titles. The writings of the story was very, very loose. The buggy AI on top of that just definitely did not make this my favorite title. I really, really wanted to find things that I liked, which is why I just was, anytime Reznov was involved, I was like, okay, I'm having a good time, at least Reznov's here. It didn't do a good job of really connecting you, in my opinion, to a lot of the characters of the story, like even earlier titles did. You really did feel like that brotherhood connection in like the original Call of Duty right from the start. So it just is not one of the strongest Call of Duty titles, and that's totally fair and alright. The pacing also felt a little off. You felt like I had very little breathing room to catch my breath in between fights, like even earlier titles had. It just, yeah, it was an odd balance of a game. One of my other favorite sequences that I did really appreciate was the plane sequence. It was definitely the coolest part about the game and most fun to play through. Still difficult, but very fun. One of the final missions of the Russian campaign, where you have to storm the NZ building, was beyond suffering. This was, again, the second only title that I had to look up a game guide, like, hey, can I get some advice on veteran mode? And the person who wrote the game guide even stated in their game guide, this mission, quote unquote, this mission comes from the depths of hell. They weren't kidding. It was brutal. I am still in shock that I was able to beat that mission, to be perfectly honest. It was rough. It's one of the few times that Call of Duty has endless waves of enemies. Typically in their game design, they have a set amount of enemies that come out at set spaces and set times and set places. So it's very easy to, even after you've died a few times, you can start to memorize where and when certain enemies are going to spawn in, which will make it easier. Honestly, memorization was how I got through playing these games on veteran mode. Just memorizing the game and where every single enemy was and just being able to execute them with extreme efficiency. That sequence was one of the very few where they just keep spawning in, and it's rough. It did definitely give me a little bit of whiplash with the fact that some of the German enemy voice lines were recycled in from the original World War II trilogy. Gave me both a bit of a nostalgia bomb and a little bit of a, huh, I've heard that before. Overall, this was my least favorite title to play. Yes, even more so than the original, despite the fact that it was technically easier than the original to play, minus that, ending storming of the building. it just wasn't one with its game design that spoke to me. I think it's a game that flourished when it came out and has a lot of nostalgia factor to it, but when you look at it with modern game design and just in comparison to all of the other games, it's a little rough around the edges. It's okay, bud. We still love you. But ooh, we're gonna go play something else now. Well, it's about time we made it. The original 2009 Modern Warfare 2. It is still a wonderful game to play 10 years later and has one of the best plot twists in video games. This game does absolutely live up to its hype. It is action-packed, masterfully paced. The music from Hans Zimmer is absolutely wonderful. It truly establishes the specific cinematic fingerprint that Call of Duty has within not just action video games, but video games as a whole. We got to see the iconic Captain McTavish, the first time we get to see Ghost, the first time we really start to see Makarov, who is one of the most iconic villains out of the entire franchise. And we get to meet Roach, our silent player protagonist. I do have a confession to make, though. This is one of the few video games I've ever actually broken a piece of equipment whilst playing. I do think that if you regularly break controllers or smash holes into walls or break TV screens whenever you play video games, it's perhaps a sign that you need to take a step back for health reasons, not just your own, but everybody else's around you and the health of your wallet as well. So it's very rare for me to feel true gamer rage. I've really only ever broken a controller one other time, and it was while playing Elden Ring. I had been tapping the R1 button so many times and so furiously it got permanently stuck down, which if any of you have played Elden Ring, you'll understand why it's like that. I lived through the Wii era, never broke a controller or a TV with the remote, and I've never really been one to, when I'm upset while playing video games, physically rage. Usually I'll, take a step back, curse a lot, and, try and take a break if I can. But I picked up a bit of a habit while playing Call of Duty that I would tap my mouse, my hand, whenever I got a little mad, and there's just this one sequence where you're playing as Roach with Ghost, and you're trying to download some files from Makarov's safe house, and then sprint across the fields to pretty much, spoiler alert, their deaths, since that's right before the iconic betrayal of Shepard. But in this sequence, it is just consistent enemies, and I was stuck dying over and over and over again on the same 5 to 10 minutes for over 40 minutes to almost an hour, and I kind of slammed my mouse out of some rage, and my really nice wireless mouse stopped working. So yeah, I've officially broken a computer mouse thanks to Call of Duty gamer rage. I'm not proud of it, but I want to be fully transparent. My friends and I definitely made jokes that I should make a 2009 Ghost cosplay, because you see him just raging constantly through the entire story. It's really interesting to see the original dynamic of Ghost and Soap, with Ghost being still a lieutenant, but being under Soap as a captain rather than Soap being a sergeant in the Modern Warfare 2 2022 remake, which was my first ever dive into this franchise and these characters. Still love them so much. Cried like an absolute baby during Ghost and Roach's deaths. Overall, still a very enjoyable game to play through. While in the grand scheme of all of Call of Duty, it is not the most difficult to play on veteran mode. It is one of the more balanced ones, far more balanced than the original Modern Warfare 1 and World at War was, but still incredibly difficult, like one can expect such a mode would be. I do really appreciate that you start to get more vibrancy of colors while still being grungy and high contrast and lower saturated in terms of colors like classic PlayStation 3 era action games of this time period. It is not nearly as devoid of color and light as the previous year's release World at War was. And it also just has a really weird release in terms of Nintendo consoles. It did get released on the Nintendo DS, but titled Modern Warfare Mobilized, and it did not get released on the Nintendo Wii. It's the only one out of the original Modern Warfare trilogy that did not get released on the Wii, which makes my physical collection of these games look weird on my shelf, but it doesn't make me crazy, no. There are articles from the devs talking about how the reason why they didn't put it on the Wii was because they felt that the Wii was not substantial in providing the cinematic experience that they wished to address. Of course, I'll be linking that article below. Take with it that information what you will. Which is just interesting because, again, Modern Warfare 3 later on came out on the Wii after that. I don't know, I had to mention that sidebar. Call of Duty has such an interesting release relationship with Nintendo consoles slash handheld devices. I would love to dive into it in a different video, but yeah, Modern Warfare 2 was really only the PC, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, kind of era. And yet somehow Nintendo DS. It's truly a fantastic game. You get to really feel how bad Makarov is. There is a sense of urgency with him. And Shepard's betrayal, even when you know that it's gonna happen, it still hits hardcore. There is absolutely a reason why when people point at the very quintessential Call of Duty game, they point at Modern Warfare 2, be it this version or even the remake. I don't really have any complaints over this particular release. Like I said, it is one of the more balanced ones. I didn't have any noticeable issues or errors other than the safe house. Yeah, it's purposefully difficult, not just for the sake of it being you playing on the game on the hardest difficulty, but it also is difficult for the sake of the story as well. It needs to be difficult. You need to feel that frantic, oh my god, we're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die, oh my god, we made it to the helicopter, we might just live, and then you're betrayed. With how difficult that section is, it is the most difficult, at least in my opinion, playing veteran mode section of the game. That relief of finally reaching Shepard's helicopter and going, oh my god, we made it, just feels like you're letting out a big breath of air that you didn't realize that you were holding the entire time, which just makes the betrayal hit so much harder. It's a great example on how utilizing difficulty in gameplay can further press the emotions and beats of a story. And it's just so much heightened, even more when you're playing on veteran mode, despite, again, knowing the plot twist. So yes, I will absolutely rank this as one of the best games to play out the entire franchise. No, I am totally not biased. Actually, I probably am totally biased with the fact that I really do enjoy the Modern Warfare characters the most, both sets, both versions, so to speak, of the Modern Warfare characters the most out of all of the Call of Duty games. They are the ones that got me interested in the Call of Duty games, so yeah, of course I'm gonna have bias. But Modern Warfare 2 still holds up well over 10 years later, and if you are looking to get into playing these games on veteran mode, I definitely recommend, if you've played the Modern Warfare franchise before, any Call of Duty franchise before, this might be a good one to get a taste and feel for what it's like to play these games on such a higher difficulty. Let's talk about the 2010 Call of Duty Black Ops 1. I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the Black Ops games, especially particularly this one. For everything that it does that I enjoy and like, it does a lot that was a bit irritating. Story-wise, it is one of the most interesting stories out of Call of Duty, with twists and turns, and genuinely is a game that I would recommend somebody play if they've never played Call of Duty before, or maybe have been hesitant about the franchise, or never would have really picked up Call of Duty on their own. Black Ops 1's story of Alex Mason and the fact that he got double brainwashed and may or may not have killed JFK, and all of its weavings of history is super fascinating. All of the Black Ops games honestly feel like a soap opera when you break down the plot beats. Don't get me wrong, every Call of Duty game has its twists and its tensions, but the Black Ops series is incredibly unhinged when you just bullet point it out on paper. There's just something about it. This game was done by Treyarch, and I know it's one of the most nostalgic ones out there. It had me on the edge of its seat with each of these plot twists, the secret numbers, what do they mean? Everything about it. The plot twist that Reznov was never actually there, a la, sorry, spoiler, Fight Club style. I had a moment while I was playing that game where I thought to myself, oh, I'm not sure if Reznov's real, and then it was revealed like a couple gameplay chapters or missions later that he actually wasn't. I don't have a lot of footage of this particular game because I got the idea to make this video when I was partway through playing the game, but again, for everything that I love with it in terms of story, which yes, you heard me right, Reznov is back. The one from World at War, the really only aspect of World at War that I particularly enjoyed, and let's face it, I enjoyed it because I knew Reznov from this game later. It is really cool how they sometimes connect certain Call of Duty storylines like this. You have also the introduction of Frank Woods, who was a character that I didn't initially like in this first game. I know he is a lot of people's number one homie. He is a great partner character, but not a great partner AI, which leads me into the reason why I definitely struggled liking this game as much as I maybe liked other titles, and that is the way the game physically felt playing, especially on veteran mode. Let's face it, veteran mode for Call of Duty heightens everything. All of the good and all of the bad. The good tension that is the Modern Warfare 2's original mission where Ghost and Roach dies, and the bad that is the partner AI for Black Ops. These helper characters were not nearly as helpful as they have been in other games. I didn't feel like the callouts they gave me or dialogue they gave me was particularly helpful. I didn't feel like they were helping me take down enemies as easily as they were in earlier or later titles. It was definitely a little more rough around the edges in terms of physical gameplay, while it still holds up as a classic game and has a really interesting and on the edge of your seat type story. Man, is it a little rough to play. There were just several moments where I would be behind some cover and I couldn't push up or do anything, and all my teammates were also sitting there not shooting and helping, and I could just hear Woods yelling, "Mason, you're getting shot at!" And I'm just sitting there clenching my fists in real life, just mad. You're not helping me. And it does lead into an interesting conversation about how a bad or good AI can affect the way that you like a character. Good examples of AIs in games that are genuinely helpful and help you endear yourself to that character include Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite, Huey from Haunting Ground, and various others. I'm sure there's plenty of companion characters that you're thinking of that you felt have been super helpful, and as a result for them being helpful, it helps you become more attached to them. Because the AI in this game was a little unhelpful, I wasn't able to attach myself to Woods as easily as so many other people do. So when he died in the game, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't feel the emotional impact and weight. And sometimes I do have to remind myself, I feel like I have to check myself constantly and go, okay, is it the character I dislike or is it the AI? And I had to really, really fight that with myself in this game. It was a little bit rough. So I unfortunately did not fall in love with Frank Woods in this particular game like so many other people have. He is such a classic 80s action star. I appreciate the tropes of his character when you break it down, but he didn't really fall into place for me in this game. I will save the moment where I actually did like him as a character for the particular game that made me fall in love with his character. We're in that stage of Call of Duty and have been for quite some time, pretty much after the original trilogy through this game and maybe a few more. We're at that stage where we're really only getting minor tweaks to each and every level of gameplay. We're still in that grungy PlayStation 3-esque era of art style and edginess. You know, in one game we might be able to pick up a riot shield for the first time. Another we might get to drive a plane in another. So we're getting tiny little additions, tiny little tweaks in each of these games. Doesn't feel as large. And of course Call of Duty eventually got its reputation of, oh, it's just another Call of Duty game except they added this thing. And that happens with a lot of long-running franchises. The Pokemon series definitely is that same way too. Not everyone's gonna be a winner, not everyone is gonna be as groundbreaking as the next. Well, I think this one is subtly more groundbreaking in the risks that it took in terms of story. The Modern Warfare series flourished with the characters that it gave you and establishing Call of Duty's specific thumbprint style of action games and cinematic storytelling and pacing that I'm sorry if you're playing a drinking game and you're taking shots every time I say masterclass of pacing or things like that, that it had started with the original trilogy. Black Ops really kind of said, well, what happens if we really start to play around more with story? So that's kind of what my thing is about having a love-hate relationship with this game. The ending is still really, really great. You know, you have that ambiguous, did he kill Kennedy or not? And then they never talk about it ever again. At the time of recording this, it is 2024. This particular section of the video I am recording in May. And we haven't really heard anything super concrete yet at the time of this particular recording about the next Call of Duty game coming out this year, which is supposed to be Black Ops Gulf War. And who knows, maybe we will get to hear more about whether or not Mason killed JFK and more about the numbers and his double brainwashings and all that. I mean, the fact that he was brainwashed twice is just so soap opera. Trying to explain this particular section of the Call of Duty franchise to somebody who has never played the game before, I'm assuming you've probably played these games if you've gotten this far and consented to watching all of these spoilers. It's just unhinged. While Black Ops' veteran mode really shows how not great the game has aged in terms of gameplay itself and maybe AI, it still is an iconic game within the franchise between its story and, once again, its zombies mode. If you really want me to talk about a zombies mode, I can do that. Just ask me in the comments. But, yeah. Here we are with the 2011 original rendition of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 from Sledgehammer. the ending of the original trilogy and the death of Captain John McTavish. It is definitely a bombastic end in terms of story, but fairly standard in terms of gameplay. Not the most difficult veteran mode to play through, nothing particularly stood out in terms of difficulty. I didn't have what happened with the original Modern Warfare 2. Yes, of course I was challenged, but nothing that really hurt. Nothing particularly stands out much in terms of difference of gameplay. Still plays very smooth and plays well over 10 years later. It is interesting to watch Captain Price devolve more and more into just rage and revenge. The end to Makarov is extremely brutal and frankly caught me off guard, but was still very satisfying. The plot twist of Yuri being the player character being a former accomplice of Makarov was a good one, and not the first time we see this plot twist, but still was very interesting and added a little bit of extra tension to the story. But its story itself is what keeps this particular title memorable. I still find the original Modern Warfare 2 and the original Modern Warfare 1 or Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare, whatever you want to call it, more enjoyable and dearer to my heart than this title, which is unfortunate one that happens at the end of a trilogy. But I wouldn't say it's a bad game at all. Just not the strongest, unfortunately, and this isn't the first time that is the case. Not terrible. Has its memorable moments, but not stellar either. And yes, of course, and finally, of course, there are a few missions that have interesting little extra tech stuff here and there, or play out interestingly from a flow or cinematic standpoint, but nothing that really felt like it was breaking a mold or bringing anything truly unique to the franchise. And with long-running franchises like this, it can feel like that's a bad thing when, oh, it's just the same thing over and over again. Not every single entry to a franchise needs to do something drastically different, as long as the game itself is enjoyable and solid. That is very true with this particular franchise. As long as the positives can balance out any negatives you might have, or the negatives are just nitpicky or negligible at best, I'm perfectly happy. I'm someone who tends to be a little bit easier pleased, but I'm sure if I had been into this franchise when this first came out, perhaps my opinions would have been a little bit different. And just like the original Modern Warfare 2, even though I knew that Captain McTavish was going to die, I was pretty much ready to cry during that scene. It's very emotional. You can hear the desperation in Price's voice, and to see that kind of vulnerability in such a hyper-masculine franchise is great. Let your male characters feel things, please. I love to see it. I mean, I don't love to see male characters or any characters I like die, but I love allowing characters to have human moments of vulnerability. Unfortunately, not much to say about this particular title. This is a very, very short sequence. However, it still was enjoyable. It was a bit of a blink and you miss it in terms of some of the other, in comparison to maybe some of the other titles that are through this video. But let's face it, we're an hour plus in. We've got a lot more to go. Let's keep it rolling. And now we've made it to Call of Duty Black Ops 2, a 2012 release from Treyarch, following two storylines as a direct sequel to Black Ops 1, with, of course, Declassified in between, but To be perfectly honest, as much as there is information missing from the start of this game, I didn't feel, after having played Declassified, I didn't really feel like I had missed too much if you don't play the PlayStation Vita exclusive title that goes in between. It more so cleans up a little bit of Black Ops 1 while setting up the villain of Black Ops 2. The other second part of the story involves a 2025 storyline with Alex Mason's son, who gave himself the edgiest codename Section. Yeah, that was this 2012 PlayStation 3 edginess that we're talking about here. This was also the first Call of Duty title to have multiple endings based upon how you do in certain strategy sequences of the game, and one other decision based around Frank Woods killing Mason by accident. I swear, the Black Ops games, when you list out all of the plot beats of these particular games, it feels like you're reading out a soap opera. It truly, truly does. Alex Mason also is shown to be not a great dad, imparting a lot of just, let's just say, Section. He didn't have a warm and fuzzy childhood growing up. Just a lot of trauma, a lot of, we gotta make you a man, a little bit of light kidnapping. It's fine. It's fine. He turned out fine. Unfortunately, I was unable to get the 100% best or good ending or whatever of the game, or true ending of the game, because on veteran mode, the strategy-based sequences of the game were incredibly difficult. You had to command troops and robots in order to capture different points and bases, and on veteran difficulty, it was hard, and they also limited the amount of times that you could try or make attempts to beat those sequences, so I just said, you know what, I'm not gonna have the best ending, and I'm gonna have to be okay with that. I mean, I was still able to beat the game, but I struggle already with top-down strategy-based games already. They're just not games that I find a lot of enjoyment in, as opposed to, say, an FPS game, for obvious reasons. If you do like top-down strategy games and you really enjoy them, that might be good for you. And I don't say that it's a bad thing that I struggled with it and couldn't get the perfect ending I desired. That's perfectly alright. It's veteran mode for a reason. And again, just like the original Black Ops title, I have a love-hate relationship with this game. As much as I find interesting or different, there's a lot that I just kind of was like, okay, I'm alright, we're continuing with this, okay. I just hadn't really connected enough with Mason or Woods in Black Ops 1, despite now looking back at Black Ops 1, I do like. But again, it's this love-hate relationship that I have with these titles. It still has that edgy PlayStation 3 grittiness to it. It is definitely an improvement in terms of AI and general playability in the regular FPS content. You can pick your loadouts a little bit. They even have an achievement where you take one of the future guns from 2024 and utilize it in the flashback sequences as Mason. So it overall is still solid. You're introducing newer things to the franchise, like, you know, picking your loadouts and abilities, having these strategy sequences, choices, so on and so forth. It's just, again, it's just, yeah, still a bit of a love-hate relationship with me. Menendez, the villain, is probably one of the best out of the franchise, second only to Makarov, I would argue. Definitely within top 5, if not top 3, of the better Call of Duty villains. Overall, still an interesting and solid title that introduces a lot more subtle stuff to the franchise. And the biggest note about playing on veteran mode is truly how difficult those top-down strategy sequences are, and how if you're playing this on the harder difficulty, you're gonna really have to work for the good ending where the world unites and such. Moving on, we have one of my personal little favorites, Call of Duty Ghosts from Infinity Ward. Ghosts is a title that when it came out, it definitely got a lot of criticism of, oh, it's just classic regular Call of Duty, but you get a dog. Yes, and you get a dog. Riley is the best boy ever. I love this dog. This game, the story itself is very lackluster. It's an okay story. The focus of it more is the characters and their relationships with each other. It has a lot of really cool sequences. It's also the only one in this entire lineup of games, as of right now, that I have 100%ed all of the achievements on. I feel very proud of myself for that. And it's one that I've spent a lot of time with. It has very interesting sequences, good mixture of stealthier stuff with, of course, your classic Call of Duty large set-piece shootouts. It has a sequence where you get to control and play as Riley the dog. While I wish there were more sequences of that throughout the game, it still was a really nice little piece and addition. They have probably one of the best stealth sequences in the game, where you are separated from the rest of the team and have to navigate a jungle utilizing a little display a la Alien Isolation, where it tracks movement and you're trying not to get caught. Obviously on easier difficulties you can just shoot your way out, but playing on veteran you really have to be sneaky, and it's a very, very slow sequence as you're mostly crawling on your stomach to avoid getting caught. While that may seem frustrating, especially on paper and for most people who really do want to play for the action, from a stealth sequence, it definitely was difficult and different from a classic stealth game like, say, the Splinter Cell series or Metal Gear Solid. This sequence, of course, is just a more refined or just slightly more modern take than a similar sequence in the original Modern Warfare 2 game at the beginning when you're playing as Roach and you're with Captain Soap in a very frozen environment with whiteout snowstorms involved. Very similar in sequence. Let's face it, a lot of Call of Duty is taking ideas they've done from previous games and reutilizing them, and that's perfectly alright. Like, oh, here's your stealth sequence, here's your driving sequence, here's your this, here's your that. Perfectly alright. There's even a really cool underwater sequence that I particularly love and enjoy because you get sharks and a sunken lighthouse. I mean, obviously, I have a thing for sharks. I do talk extensively more about that shark sequence in another YouTube video, totally plugging my channel here, talking about the ways that sharks are portrayed in video games. I will, of course, be linking that below. The characters themselves were all fairly interesting enough. We've got just this edgy group of guys all wearing their masks and calling themselves ghosts. The narrations from the father were particularly interesting in their own special brand of edginess, and I can't help but love it. It's one of those games that definitely has gotten better with age, because now we look back on it 10 years later and I can almost appreciate it as camp, if that somewhat makes sense, when you don't take it insanely seriously. It does, however, have a wild cliffhanger of an ending where you think you've killed the villain. Like, by all reasons, it feels like you should have killed him. You shot him underwater, and yet somehow he crawls out and drags the player character Logan away. And 10 years later, we have had no continuation. Infinity Ward, please, I'm begging you. Overall, it's one of those titles that I have a personal love to, but I can completely understand why it's one that somebody maybe thought, oh, I was a little bit more bored with this one and didn't enjoy it as much. And it's not one that I would recommend to somebody who's maybe newer to the Call of Duty franchise. It might not grip you as easily as, say, Black Ops 1 or the Modern Warfare series does, or did for me. But still, it's one that I hold a very special place in my heart. really enjoyed it. I've revisited it multiple times. It has a nice balance of insanely difficult pieces while playing as veteran mode, but not enough for me to break a mouse or feel like I couldn't beat the game. I definitely struggled, but it was a manageable struggle that still made me feel accomplished at the end of it. Has its fair share of interesting set pieces. It is definitely a game of what you make of it. For some, it might be on the more boring side, and for others, you might find little joys in it. I definitely did go down the fanfiction rabbit hole with this game. For some reason, this game, next to, of course, the Modern Warfare series. The Modern Warfare series has an insane amount of fanfictions, partially because of Soap and Ghost, and they also made it within the top 5 fanfiction pairings on Archive of Our Own in 2023. If you don't care about fanfiction or shipping or whatever, that's all right. Fanfiction, pairing off characters, especially putting characters in queer relationships, that's not for every fan. Listen, I grew up as a teenage girl on the internet with fanfiction.net and Wattpad and DeviantArt. Archive of Our Own, I remember when Archive of Our Own came out. I grew up reading like supernatural fanfictions in high school, so like my relationship with fandom is definitely very different than, I would say, the average Call of Duty player. If you go to my Twitter, I definitely retweet my fair share of Call of Duty fan art, both shipping and not shipping. I just am somebody who usually engages a lot with fan art and fan fictions in whatever sort of media I get into. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is Ghosts, along with Black Ops, specifically Black Ops Cold War, is one of the higher franchises within the game in terms of fanfiction creations, partially because of Keegan. How can you not fall in love with that edgy man and his soulful blue eyes? Either way, I can understand how somebody might not enjoy Ghost as much as I do. It also is the first time we get to see... Ghost is also very interesting because we have space station sequences that are super fun with Zero-G. This game continues to introduce new aspects and new pieces to the franchise that you will later see developed and worked on more. It does a lot of different and unique and interesting things. While still on the surface, it appears to be, yes, just another Call of Duty title, but with a dog. And I won't argue with those statements. But having played now all of the Call of Duty games, it has its fair share of subtle differences and new little pieces and tiny little details that you can see. So, while it might not be everybody's favorite, or you might have been bored with it upon release, it's still, in my opinion, maybe worthwhile revisiting if you have played even just a few, 1 or 2 other Call of Duty titles in the past, or you haven't played it in years, whatever the case may be. It's a personal favorite of mine, but it doesn't have to be everyone's. Here we are at Advanced Warfare, the 2014 release from Sledgehammer Games that gave us the beautiful press F to pay respects meme, Kevin Spacey's there, and a severely underutilized Troy Baker. This game really highlights something that's interesting about Sledgehammer when it comes to Call of Duty releases and development. Oftentimes, Sledgehammer will introduce or do something a little bit different or unique with the gameplay. At the time, it's typically not received well, and then later on, it's either repurposed or repackaged in later titles, or we look back on it much more fondly. Advanced Warfare is one that I do really enjoy. It is the first time we get the jetpack boots. We get a lot more futuristic stuff and a lot more focus on different movement styles within the game, and it makes it a very interesting and different playthrough. I really love the UI on the corner with the gun, where you can see like grenades and other stuff reflected on there. The sound design is very satisfying to the ears, It's overall just a really interesting title that has done better with age than its initial release. It does struggle with the fact that we're around that time in 2014, less and less FPS games were utilizing the traditional silent protagonist route that you would have with original Call of Duty or with titles like Half-Life, BioShock, and so on. And we were starting to move more into allowing our FPS characters to actually have a character and not just be a tool for the player to insert themselves into the game. Which just, you can feel that struggle with Advanced Warfare. You've got Troy Baker, who is an iconic voice actor, playing a character who doesn't speak for much of the campaign, only during cutscenes. And I really feel like the game could have flourished even more if Troy Baker had been allowed to have more speaking roles. I've played BioShock Infinite. He can play a fantastic FPS character. Playing it on veteran mode is still a very nice challenge as you go through the game and you pick up extra files and just continue through it. You do have a customization option where you can upgrade your rigs and per what you may prefer. Say you want to focus more on grenades over increasing other aspects or upgrades, giving you some semblance of level progression or a reason to replay the game to get every single upgrade. The tiny little new fresh ideas that this game brought on definitely were rippled out within later titles, and that is absolutely the most important thing worth noting with this particular release. It's got an enjoyable stealth sequence that gives you a grappling hook, among other enjoyable sequences like piloting a mech. Overall, still a very solid title, but like Ghosts the year prior, it's not something you would typically pick up with, or I would recommend starting with if you were just going to get into the franchise. But like Ghosts as well, it can be a good title to start with if you have been playing Call of Duty and want to dip your toes into playing it on harder difficulties. Difficult, but still manageable. And now we move on to Black Ops 3. I have very complicated thoughts with Black Ops 3. Like the rest of the Black Ops franchise, I have a love-hate relationship with this game. This game builds off of a lot of what Advanced Warfare did in terms of choice-based upgrades and increased movement and futuristic tech, refining that Call of Duty approach that you can have to a futuristic-esque sci-fi, not even whatever, just future action game. This was a Treyarch release, and is the first time you actually get to customize your player character in a campaign. Yes, it's a very basic customizer, and to me, if I can't have pink hair in a character customizer, it's not a good character customizer. And I love me a good character customizer. I have been spoiled by games like Mass Effect and later titles like Elden Ring or Dragon's Dogma in terms of qualities of character customizer. Obviously with Call of Duty, you're not gonna have too much variety. That's to be expected, but does make me sad, but hey, I'll take whatever I can get. I actually got to play as a female character with a female voice acting, so I'll take what I can get. Again, there's a lot of upgrades. You can pick your own loadout for each mission, really bringing forth a more RPG approach to the franchise. Its story is really only Black Ops in name. You get one mention to our villain of Black Ops 2, and that's about it. Again, I have a love-hate relationship with the story of this game. It had a lot of potential that I feel like didn't get pushed enough. Obviously, I'm going to talk about major spoilers. You have an evil AI character that is making other characters behave irrationally, go insane, kill, whatever, you know, just altering their behavior. This AI is born out of human experimentation and suffering. It is revealed by its own creator in a way that it is a glitch. It was not meant to exist. And that is always, I think, a really interesting way of approaching any sort of evil AI or robotic or any sort of like experiment-based creation in whether it be sci-fi, fantasy, whatever the genre is. The idea that it wasn't created with a purpose, that it was either an accident or something like that, you can really explore some interesting themes with it. Obviously, it's Call of Duty. What did you think it was going to be deep? Still, we had a great idea, but I think the reason why I struggle with a lot of lost potential is because this is not a choice-based or multiple ending game like Black Ops 2 was. I kind of had expected there to be multiple endings with this one, since Black Ops 2 gave us at least 2 different endings, plus like kind of a half a third, depending upon how you did with the strategy-based missions. But partially through the game, it was consistently imposed upon you the idea that the tech in your head that made you a super soldier, that you had to, with purpose, turn on at the beginning of every single mission. It didn't carry over from the mission prior. You had to, with purpose, turn on your special abilities to be able to see things and activate your super soldier powers. It was a conscious thing. And it was imposed upon you several times in the game by other characters, saying you can't rely too much on this, you know, and so on and so forth. Rather than that just being the source of madness and the source of the way that this AI could spread the virus, I had a thought of, oh, what if it's something like, oh, the more I use it, the more I'm moving towards a bad ending. I felt like there was a lot of potential of rewarding or not rewarding players based upon how much or how they used that certain ability. That could factor into a good ending or a bad ending. Bad ending meaning you use it the more, which would mean that it would be easier for you to be corrupted by this AI and so forth, like say a Dishonored game or the BioShock series, making these conscious choices. Again, obviously it's Call of Duty. I'm not gonna fault it too much for having that missed potential. It's just something that I thought could have been really interesting. The ending in of itself is like, oh, okay, and you know, it's supposed to give you that cliffhangery ending like Ghost did, but it really, in that point, didn't give me that much impact. So it is unfortunately a bit of a lost potential, in my opinion, earning it further that love-hate relationship. That being said, it is one of the smoothest titles to date to play. It felt good to play. I enjoyed physically playing. Even though I was definitely struggling with it from a narrative standpoint, it still felt good. And most people, when you do ask them about this particular title, can be conflicted or split down the middle. It's definitely an interesting addition in the franchise, but one that still plays very nicely. The controls are intuitive. I never felt like I had to fight with certain aspects of it or that there were too many glitches. It was overall very smooth, very enjoyable. Definitely one of the more fun ones to play, even though once again, I didn't really care about the characters and I was disappointed by the story. Again, it's a love-hate relationship with this one. Why? So, yeah, I begrudgingly rate this as one of the better gameplay experiences, despite all of my issues. And here we are with Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, a release by Infinity Ward. Unfortunately, I have next to no, if at all, I'll see what I can salvage clips of my gameplay of this game, because every single time I tried to record, my recording software crashed. I don't know if at the time I just needed an update, or if there was something wrong with my computer, or if it just didn't like the specific game, but it's a huge shame because this is one of the most wonderful games visually. I literally wrote in my notes that it was a breath of fresh air, because right before playing this game, I had gone through the gauntlet of playing all of the original World War II trilogy games, World at War, so I was desperate for something fresh. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did all of the side missions to upgrade my ship, and all of the space fights were really, really fun and enjoyable. I loved our supporting character of Ethan the robot. He was super duper sassy. It was an interesting dynamic to go from a, you know, lower ranked character suddenly being promoted to a captain of a ship. It was enjoyable. We once again got our futuristic jetpacky little extra future bits that we have seen in Advanced Warfare and in Black Ops 3. Overall, very well balanced. It was thoroughly difficult. I had quite a few moments that were tricky, of course, with any other veteran mode game. The true real piece of difficulty that I had was that it felt like the quick saves were fewer and further between than in other titles. So if I died, it really, really was a problem where I was like, okay, I have to replay this bit all over again. Whereas it was inconvenient, obviously, to die in literally any other game, but not nearly as inconvenient as it felt in this title. Not as much had been lost, if that makes sense. The graphics have aged very well. One of my other complaints was that you had to hold down a button in order to go prone, whereas other titles, it was a little bit more of a click. So that, like, half a second of delay definitely bit me in the ass quite a lot. And when it comes to veteran mode, half a second really can mean life or death, and, well, at least digital life or death, and having to replay certain pieces in this particular level of difficulty. You had, of course, another sequence where you got to choose your loadouts, just like in Black Ops 3. However, it had a much more charming aspect to it because you had a character in the armory who could give you recommendations or would let you test out guns. Just having another character to talk to you and add a little bit of more personality to that aspect of the game was really, really nice. That being said, they did a good job of endearing you to all of the characters and people on the ship, and then they would kill them off, which hurt a lot. I mean, it's a Call of Duty war game, so of course people are gonna die, but man, did it hurt each and every time. We got a really cool hacking mechanic that was super fun to play with. It was just a lot of, like, little different unique pieces that were added into this game that really, really make it stand out and make it different from a typical Call of Duty title, which I think backfired when it first released, but now when we get to look back on it, you know, almost 10 years later, it's really, really fun, and a game that I would recommend to somebody who likes sci-fi action games and has never touched a Call of Duty before. I didn't feel like the side missions were incredibly tedious to do. I felt motivated to do all of them because they gave me upgrades to make it easier for me in actual story missions. During space travel, I got to upgrade my ship a little bit with extra little stickers. Super duper fun. My main story complaint is that the villain was actually one of the weakest aspects. Our villain was played by Kit Harington from Game of Thrones, who is a really great actor, and I absolutely don't blame him at all. I do, however, feel that we were told more than we were shown that he was a bad guy, which just, yeah, you know, I saw battles, and the beginning of the game was very emotional to watch the city get destroyed and people killed, and the hacking of the ATIS guns. I have to say ATIS because when they were yelling at the beginning of the game and they were shouting it constantly, it sounded like something naughty. So just want to articulate it further. So the stakes were placed high very strongly at the beginning of the game, but for most of it I still didn't feel those stakes as much until towards the end, when characters were really starting to drop like flies. We had a near-death experience for the main character, but it didn't feel because of that specific villain. If that makes sense, he wasn't the strongest, despite still feeling like there was an element of danger to the plot. Overall, I think part of what made this game so wonderful for me was because I've been playing so many colorless, historical titles, and so for me to really dive into a game that had beautiful space visuals on some of the planets and have just very wonderful dialogue between a lot of the characters made it so much more enjoyable for me and fun. Moving on, we are at Call of Duty World War II from Sledgehammer Games. This is my favorite, actually, of all of the World War II historical-based games out of the franchise, and unfortunately, like a lot of games starting with Advanced Warfare or others, it suffered a lot from not having good reviews when it first came out, but now when you look back on it, it's really, really good. It takes the whole Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers style of World War II storytelling that the originals were based off of, and gives it that fresh, more modern coat of paint to it. It felt almost like a love letter to the original Call of Duty games and the original formula and idea that these games were based off of. You had a bunch of characters that, ragtag squad that, you might not like them at first, but they become so endearing as it goes along that if they're not there, their presence is really, really felt. One of the most notable changes in this game was the fact that you didn't have automatic healing. For the first time since really the first game, you didn't just heal after a short period of time. You had to gather and collect med packs and then actively use them while in the middle of a fight. Totally unique mechanic, and one that I'm glad only stuck with World War II. It was perfect for this game, but does not really work as well, in my opinion, in any other Call of Duty title. And part of that is the player character's best friend. Zussman, just like any of the other characters that you have as companions in the game, have a special ability to hand you a certain item or help you out in the battlefield. One character can spot enemies through walls, another character can give you extra ammo or grenades or smoke grenades for mortar strikes. Zussman, who is a character that you have the most as a companion as opposed to any of the other characters, gives you med packs, which is incredibly useful, especially in a veteran difficulty gameplay. There were also, of course, little tiny things like performing acts of heroism by saving other characters that were in danger, but Zussman and the way that he functioned as the character to give you med packs was wonderfully done, because this was a great example of using gameplay to help endear you to a character, much like, say, Elizabeth out of BioShock Infinite in the way that she helps out Booker. Zussman really makes a difference with those med packs. They don't really hand those out like candy, at least on veteran mode, so there were a lot of sequences where I was really, really struggling for health, and Zussman, anytime it came on a cooldown for him to hand me a med pack, I was crying and saying thank you on my side of the screen. And so at one point during the game, when you are separated from Zussman and he is captured by NZs, his presence being gone really, really hurts, and you feel it, not just adding further flavor to the narrative aspect of losing Zussman. Very, very wonderfully done, and this is something that's going to be present, obviously, if you're playing this on normal mode, but it's heightened so much more with the stakes and difficulty of veteran mode. it was a really, really tricky campaign where I had to take breaks often. There was a tank fight. The volume of enemies that this game would send at you was a lot. It probably is, when you really look at it, the same as any other title, but because I had these cooldown mechanics and the health packs, it really, oftentimes, I felt overwhelmed with the amount of enemies, and they would just take you over. There was one sequence where you had to defend the top of a hill, and that was tough. I had to resort to tactics that I picked up in earlier, harder titles, like hiding in a specific corner and really memorizing and understanding everything and locking in. We once, of course, get at the beginning of the title a classic redo of the Normandy beach invasion, something that has been done multiple times within the franchise, but again really adds this level of homage not just to the history of those that fought in World War II, but also of the franchise's core itself. This is a game that, like Infinite Warfare, I would absolutely recommend to somebody who has never touched a Call of Duty game before if they are interested in historical-based games. While it's not going to give you everything that actual nonfiction book could give you, it's still a worthwhile play if you are somebody who enjoys watching programs like Saving Private Ryan, or enjoys indulging a little bit in a video game that takes place during a historical time. The brutality of this game felt less gratuitous like World at War did, and again more like Saving Private Ryan. Please don't take a shot every time I say Saving Private Ryan, because I'm so sorry, I don't want you to go to the hospital. It was violence that carried much more of an emotional weight rather than just, here's some violence, like World at War felt. Not that World at War's violence obviously didn't have the historical weight, but it just didn't feel as gratuitous. It felt poignant. We had a really, really wonderful infiltration scene that is later utilized within the franchise, playing as a female character who is infiltrating an NZ headquarters, and just having that tension of being a spy and trying to help out your team. You could go in loud, or in the case of veteran mode, it is best that you go as stealthy as possible. To it, and it was tense as heck. One of my main complaints really would be the bomber flight controls were very, very clunky and rough to deal with. I did not enjoy those sequences at all and truly struggled. Maybe it's a me issue, maybe I should have played more with the controls, and this is definitely not something that was indicative of the difficulty setting that I was on. It just felt wrong and just not as intuitive, and I felt like I was fighting the controls more than I was the enemies. Obviously, it was going to ramp up the difficulty in terms of the damage that I was taking, but oh, not a fun sequence for me. It actually felt more like a downgrade for me, considering how smooth the flight controls were in Infinite Warfare, so I think that's probably why it felt so much more rough for me. So going back to what I mentioned about the characters, Call of Duty excels not just within its pacing and action, as well as its contributions to the shifting trends or landscape or just anything to do with FPS in general, but it is truly at its best from a story standpoint when it really makes you care about the characters, and this one does so in a very wonderful and slow burn and subtle way. By the end of the game, I truly loved each and every one of these ragtag lads, ones that just made me roll my eyes and go, okay, this is who I have, in the first opening sequence of the game. But yeah, I unapologetically did love World War II. It was on the far more difficult side of what I would consider the modern, meaning like mid-2010s to present day of Call of Duty games, but it utilized that difficulty to really, once again, endear me to the characters and feel the stress of the situations and battles that they were in, and how almost futile it felt at times, and how good it felt when you finally did get that win. It's like a Dark Souls game. You gotta suffer a lot to really feel like you earned it. Moving on to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the 2019 edition. You can obviously see that I skipped 2018's release, and that is Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which was a campaign-less game done by Treyarch. This is back with Infinity Ward, and I love this game. This game, rather than what the original Modern Warfare series did, started an idea of let's really slow burn this story. The original Modern Warfare series, everything was really fast, lots were happening in between campaigns, but this one said no. We're gonna really take our time with this one. At least that was this reboot version's original intention. It focuses on Gaz and Price, as well as new characters like Farah, Alex, and Laswell. We got to see the developing relationship between Gaz and Price, and just Gaz coming into his own as a new version of this classic character. In the original Modern Warfare game, you already see Gaz and Price very well attuned to each other and having known each other for a long period of time. This is a very different take on Gaz, and one that I absolutely love. So seeing them learn to trust each other, and Price acting as a mentor to Gaz, was really refreshing from a narrative standpoint and a just legacy aspect of the franchise. I love our newer characters like Farah, Alex, and Laswell as well. Alex is just the perfect himbo. I actually do own the art book for this game. Tragically, it's the only art book that they ever put out. It's not a strategy guide. It's fully on the artwork, concept, and creation of the game. I really wish they would come out with one for the newer Modern Warfare 2. I would buy it in a heartbeat. But one of the notes that I really loved about it was that Alex's visual style was designed specifically so that way he would be able to blend in with Farah's group right from the jump. I love it. They literally tailor-made a himbo for her. Perfection. All of the performances are really fantastic. There is a heartbreaking plot twist in regards to Farah's brother. And just like World War II, a lot of new tiny little mechanics or sequences that really, again, made the campaign fun to play. There is a sniper rifle sequence where you're playing as Alex with a sniper rifle that is given to him by Farah's brother. Very emotional. That is reminiscent of this sniper sequence that is part of the All Elite Up mission in the original Modern Warfare series, where you have to mess with curve and wind in order to make the right shots. There's stealthy sequences, there's another heartbreaking sequence where you're playing as a young child Farah, and it's a terrifying sequence and you feel very powerless, which it's not something that happens often in a Call of Duty game. Overall, the game feels good. It's difficult, but a smidge easier than World War II, I would say. The controls felt good. There were no complaints there. It overall is a solid title with tiny little things that I really loved. Obviously, there's a lot of criticism that you could also take with certain elements of the story, but we're not going to dive too deep into that. Mechanically, again, it's good. The really only truly difficult sequence that is difficult regardless of the mode you're on, but just feels, is the final boss fight against a Juggernaut as Alex. Juggernauts, if you're not aware, are heavily armored enemies with big ol' spinny guns that will tear into you. You had to play it like a traditional boss fight in any other game, and Call of Duty isn't exactly known for boss fights. Obviously, you have boss fights in a lot of Call of Duty titles, like tank fights or space fights or chasing after certain characters, but this is like the most classic video gamey boss fight sequence against a human character that the franchise has. You have to chip away at him, run around corners, pray that your allies can help you out with doing some damage. It's tough, and of course playing it on veteran mode had me crying and shedding a few tiny little tears of difficulty there. Maybe it just feels manageable for me because I had been playing so many other of these games on veteran mode, and I can't there is a moment I have thought through this video where, oh gosh, is my sense of whether or not this is difficult or not, like, because I played them all and it just starts to feel easier for me, or is it because this one is more difficult than the other one? Sometimes it's almost subtle, but that being said, it is definitely one of the stronger campaigns out of the franchise, for sure. It starts and sets up something really wonderful, that being my favorite out of all the games, the Modern Warfare 2 2022. Yes, I am that person. I will say that one is still my favorite. This is one that I like to replay regardless of difficulty that I put it on, and it ran smooth for me. I don't have these tiny little things to nitpick nearly as much as I do in other titles because it felt good. So, there we go. Well, we are officially getting closer and closer to the end. You can tell that I'm tired because I have now put on my giant favorite oversized hoodie that I like to wear whilst gaming that got me through a lot of these games. But here we go. Home stretch, baby. We are now on to the 2020 release of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The 5th in the mainline Black Ops games, technically the 6th of the Black Ops. And wow, is it probably my favorite out of it. I know I'm gonna get a lot of y'all hating me for it, but this was my favorite Black Ops game. I'm sure part of it is in line with how smooth it plays, it being more of a modern title as opposed to all of the glitches in the original Black Ops games, especially 1. But I do really love this particular title. It is Treyarch as the main leading studio, and wow, is it good. This title once again highlights the strength of the Black Ops series, that being its storylines and its twists and its turns. We once again get a character creator in a way at the very beginning of the game where you get to pick various things like gender and background and so on, which also get to play a little bit into some extra stats for the game, which is a really, really nice little touch. I absolutely love that, and I will admit, since I was playing this on a much more difficult setting, I personally chose to pick stuff that would benefit my playstyle or would give me more health, something that I knew I would need a lot of in a veteran mode style game. We once again get to see Frank Woods and Mason again. I love this version of Frank Woods. Yes, his voice actor changed. I love how he's evolved from such a serious character to now he takes himself so seriously. It is borderline camp and goofy, and I know a lot of old school players may not particularly like that rendition, but for me, I love a serious campy character that can give me a good laugh. I found him much more endearing in this title. I'm sure part of it is also the fact that I have played through several other games with him, so I do have a baseline for his character and some care and knowledge of him, but this was definitely a much more endearing version of the character in my personal opinion. Totally fair if this is not your favorite version. While yes, you spend most of the game playing as Belle, your player character, you do get a sequence playing once again as Mason, which I had a moment when we rappelled into a very specific abandoned building, and I thought to myself, why does this feel familiar? And then I saw the numbers flash on the screen, a callback to the original game. This game, by the way, is supposed to take place in between 1 and 2, and will be pretty much overriding the original storylines for 2 and 3, which I am perfectly okay with. You guys already know the reasons why I don't like 2 and 3 as much in terms of story. But when I saw those numbers flash, I had my own, what felt like a sleeper agent activation, where I remembered that exact room in the original game and spending a lot of time in it, thanks to how difficult it was. So we love ourselves a callback that also gave me a little bit of a flashback jump scare there for a moment. It is another story where you do get multiple endings based upon a few choices, whether or not you save two characters, whether or not you choose to betray the person that brainwashed you or go along with them to save the world, quote unquote. Overall, a fantastic addition to the Call of Duty games in terms of story. We once again got another more open, stealthy kind of infiltration mission that we saw in World War II, this time once again in Soviet territory. And this was one of my favorite pieces out of the story. You have a very, very trippy dream sequence where Adler is trying to get the location of a bunker out of you, and I definitely fought back against it a lot. Unfortunately, my footage got a little bit corrupted of my original playthrough, so the current footage you're seeing is on an easier difficulty. It's so trippy, and there's even little Easter eggs to the zombies mode that you can find, and the more you resist, the trippier and trippier it gets, and it is a very interesting and wonderful gameplay sequence. Gameplay-wise, everything is very smooth and easier to deal with. Having that extra customization in the beginning definitely made it, or at least made me feel like I had a little bit more power and control, especially on such a higher difficulty. I didn't have any spaces that particularly struck out as incredibly difficult. Yes, there were, you know, a few parts that I had to replay a lot of, but nothing that felt awful. A fun experience, and because I actually enjoyed this one so much, I do actually look forward to see where Call of Duty Black Ops 6 goes later this year. At the time of filming this particular sequence, they haven't done the worldwide reveal event, so I've only had a few teasers yet, but I'm interested. Very, very interested. Next up, we're moving to the 2021 release, Vanguard. I really wanted to like this game. I heard nothing but not great reviews and talks about this game. I wanted to really like it. I struggled. Now, this one did release during 2021, so most likely, I'm just guessing here, don't take this as fact, I'm sure a lot of the development was affected by the big event that kicked off in March of 2020. But man, this is definitely one of the glitchier and rougher to play titles out of all of them. The movement feels so sluggish, especially in comparison to Cold War the year prior, and the game that you're gonna get right after in 2022. The aim down sight feels like it takes forever. It's like maybe a half a second difference, but boy howdy does that mean the world, especially in something like a harder difficulty setting, or maybe even in a multiplayer game. The gun swap speed feels slow as well, which I want to give it the grace since this is a World War II storyline, so it's like, oh, historical accuracy, realism. I don't care about that. It was definitely rough to swap to. Reload didn't feel like that was affected by the timing. Maybe I was just crazy. It just felt clunky. I felt like I was wearing 200 pounds of armor and like the weights that Rock Lee wears in Naruto. Like, except I feel like I was still wearing the weights, and, it was just Naruto meme. I do love the base idea for this game. You get a ragtag team of various people who were overlooked during World War II. You have essentially like an anthology of their origin stories and them coming together as a team. Each character has their own different special abilities, so it's like they're trying to build off a little bit on what made the World War II good, but it just, there's a lot that definitely I struggled with. It did also feel like it took a long time for the auto heal to kick in as well, and these were some of the dumbest NPCs I've ever seen. I felt like there were times where I would stand next to an enemy and they didn't even see me, which baffling considering the difficulty that I was on. I had to double check a few times. I even at one point while aiming down sights at the very beginning of the game watched an enemy despawn through like my aim down sights. It was rough to say the least. My allies didn't feel like they helped me as much either. It was a rough time. Thankfully, because a lot of the enemies were kind of on the dumber side, I didn't feel as bogged down because the game itself was difficult. It was more so things like controls that would give me issues, like the flight controls during those sequences were a pain in my butt. I probably could have toggled with them more, but at that point, I just wanted it to be done with those sequences. Which is a shame because I really wanted to endear myself to these characters, but so many of the gameplay difficulties made it harder for me to do so. I didn't feel like I got the same connections to these characters as I have had in pretty much almost any other title. So, great example of how bad gameplay or just clunky gameplay can really affect how you feel about characters and their stories. Granted, Polina, voiced by Laura Bailey, was probably some of my favorite sequences to deal with, not just because she was the only lady on the team, but she was a sniper by trade and had some really fun, stealthy sequences. Personally, I prefer to use sniper rifles, and I really do enjoy when Call of Duty goes the stealth route, typically, in their gameplay, and I felt like also her story was the most enjoyable next to our Australian character named Lucas Riggs, who is a demolitionist. His sequences were also very, very fun as well, though difficult due to a large volume of enemies, still quite delightful. I feel like I am being a little bit nitpicky with this game, but I can't help it, especially considering how I've had games in this franchise come out prior to it that ran so much smoother and were far more enjoyable, especially when this is a World War II title, which is Call of Duty's original bread and butter. I will give it a little bit of props for the interesting death of the player character Novak within the first mission. That was quite an interesting plot twist. Very rarely do you witness your player character die through their eyes. Obviously, it's happened before in Call of Duty, but it definitely had me go, oh my, wasn't expecting that. It wasn't a plot twist on the levels of, say, any of the Black Ops series, but it was just wasn't expecting that. Interesting. I do appreciate this game for trying a bit of a different structure in terms of its storytelling, but just didn't quite hit the nail on the head with this one. Perhaps just like any other Sledgehammer game, they will try something like this again and learn from their issues or mistakes or just things that didn't work as well, and I hope that they do. To give this game a shred of something good to say, probably the coolest / my favorite sequence other than literally any of the Polina bits was at the very end of the game when you're doing the final assault and all that jazz. The swap between characters and cinematics was really cool. It was a nice way to tie up all their stories together. It was enjoyable from a gameplay perspective. It looked sick as hell. You know, tiny little nuggets. It's within my personality to want to find the good in things, and when something is given such a large negative review online, I usually try to go into it with a little bit more grace and wanting to find the good over wanting to go into something expecting only bad. It's within my personality, because I do recognize that these games are created by a lot of hardworking people, just like any other game or piece of art is. I just also don't like to be very negative. Granted, of course, nothing is above criticism, especially Call of Duty. There's a lot to be said about the gamification of war, and that being a deeper conversation. I look at Call of Duty as being like a bag of potato chips or junk food. It's not exactly high art. It should not be your way of framing war and greater implications. It is that sort of story being told from, let's face it, a glamorized soldier's perspective, and glosses over the horrors of war while maybe tapping into smaller things like loss and certain hardships, but is still a more glamorized version like you would typically see in cinema. However, at the same time, just like a reality TV show, you can still enjoy the characters, game design, and enjoy the game themselves while still acknowledging that it's not perfect or, like I said, junk food. But I usually try to look at things from more of a constructive criticism standpoint rather than, this is terrible. The ending of the game also does do a little bit of a tie-in with the current run for the zombie stories. We're trying to bring and bridge all of the games together. We're not really talking about zombies this video, but interesting little nugget where I went, I recognize that name. So yeah, Vanguard unfortunately was the easiest vet mode to play and one of the clunkiest. So sorry, Vanguard, I really wanted to like you. Alright, it's time to move on to my absolute favorite, the Modern Warfare 2 2022 game. Now, of course, the friend that introduced me to these games did say, typically, your favorite Call of Duty game is going to be the one that you first played, which I absolutely, totally agree with. Nostalgia plays a huge place in favoritism and enjoying a game and looking back on it with fond memories and having something to compare the rest of the entries to. This game got me invested, it got me into the series. I love it. I've replayed it so many times with the campaign. This also was the first campaign I beat on veteran mode and made me go, hey, might as well play them all. Let's do it. This is once again Infinity Ward coming back and doing a beautiful job. There's a lot that's very beautifully done with this game, from the characters, how they endear themselves to you, the eye contact, the pacing, the story. While it can be basic, it flows through very nicely. The gameplay elements are wonderful. It was a great twist on the Shepard plot twist again, bringing in Graves and giving some persona to the Shadow Company. I think part of why Graves works so great both as a character and with his plot twist and version of the Shadow Company is he almost represents the older Call of Duty-esque protagonist who is very ooh-rah and has so many gadgets and toys. So it's almost like taking another dash or crack or twist at the old Call of Duty while bringing in the new. Introduction of new characters like Alejandro, Rudolfo, Valeria, and so on. New takes on Soap and Ghost, which, need I say more? More of the new version of Price and Gaz. We once again get to see Farah as well. Lots of really fun missions. There's a driving mission as Gaz that is heart-pounding. You have the infamous Alone mission playing as Soap with Ghost's fun little dialogue of the two of them together. It's a stealth mission that you can go loud with, but is far more fun with how stealthy and creative you can get with it. There is an achievement where you can go through that mission without firing a gun once, and I did get it on veteran mode. if I do say so myself. It's not the only stealth mission in the game. There is one right after your interrogation from Valeria, aka Knife Mommy, which you can also attack or go through in multiple different ways. There's other ones where you play as Gaz, but then of course there's plenty of ones where you quote-unquote go loud. There's a tank boss fight. So much fun gameplay, taking a few staples out of the franchise and adding some fresh little bits with it. Everything ran, at least for me at the time, very smoothly. I didn't have any glitches or problems. I felt like it was challenging but balanced. It did not, since this was the first one that I played on veteran mode, yes, I had beaten it originally on normal mode, so I knew what to expect, but I didn't feel like it was balanced against me. Yes, I struggled with a couple sequences in the end, but that is, of course, due to its difficulty. There's a sequence where you're chasing down Graves during the Ghost Team mission, while you're trying to free Alejandro's base. And if you aren't fast enough, he can actually get away, giving you a game over screen. So while juggling enemies on a difficult setting and trying to keep up and move forward was a challenge, but not something I would complain about. Final mission in Chicago also gave me a lot of difficulty, but it is the final mission in the game, so yeah, it's to be expected that I'm gonna have a hard time. I still beat it, and I'm very proud of myself for it. The story once again continues the initial plan of this timeline of slow burning it, eventually moving into the introduction of Makarov at the very, very last cinematic at the end. I have nothing but really praise for. This is where my borderline nostalgia goggles start to come into play. Yes, I played it for the first time last year, but still, it's gonna be hard for me to say anything negative about this game. Now, of course, I haven't been talking about multiplayer at any other point in this video. However, it is worth noting that a lot of story stuff was revealed during multiplayer season opening cinematics, such as the return of Graves, a confrontation between Alejandro and Valeria that takes place after the end of the game. I'm gonna say, Graves, who was one of your main antagonists in the game and is killed dramatically, I'm not about him coming back, because it was a death that had meaning, it was very satisfying, and while I was happy to see Alex come back, who was rumored to be dead, thought to be dead in his 2019 game, to have two characters whose deaths were meaningful and then come back to life was okay at first, but then Modern Warfare 3 happened. I'm getting ahead of myself, but Modern Warfare 2, I really liked it. It's a great example. When you take a look at it outside of Call of Duty, it is a really great example on taking something that is cemented within people's memories, minds, nostalgia, all that jazz, characters that are well known, and doing a completely different take on them while still feeling good to their core, while also feeling fresh and adding more to it. I love it. Here we are. Modern Warfare 3 from Sledgehammer. I didn't want to be disappointed. I was excited. I was jazzed. But it was rough. This was not initially meant to be the 2023 release for Call of Duty. It is, of course, the 20th anniversary of the entire franchise. That was originally supposed to be the Black Ops 6 game. So you could feel that a lot of it was rushed. Gone was all of that beautiful slow burn and careful tinkering that made this version of this trilogy so good and so wonderful. I don't blame the actors at all. I definitely don't blame a lot of the people that were working on it, because they were dealt a very rough hand. So unfortunately with the story, it felt like a whole lot of nothing was going on, and then at the very end, soap. bad things happen to Soap, which is really rough considering how his demise was the original Modern Warfare 3. You're really gonna repeat a plot point from 10 years ago and do it worse? This is where I was talking about Modern Warfare 2. Characters' deaths who meant something that then were suddenly taken back. As of where we are right now, it doesn't feel like there's a narrative benefit to killing off Soap. It felt like a last-minute decision for shock factor because a whole lot of nothing happened in the game, and a lot of Makarov's story, his actor did a great job. A lot of his story was built off of his previous name from the original trilogy, and obviously seeing the devastation in the stadium, but just like in Infinite Warfare, I felt like our main villain, we were told that he's bad, but not necessarily or as strongly shown that he's bad, especially not as much as the original trilogy in comparison. Again, the actors and people working on this game were definitely on a time crunch and working the best that they could, so it's hard for me to really go into it. My problem with this title's campaign was not the length, it was the quality. There's a joke in there. You can go ahead and make it. So, killing off Soap felt like, oh, look how bad Makarov is, our boys are gonna be so angry and they're really gonna have the vengeance for him. The way I see it is, now these characters are gonna be the worst versions of each other in an unfun way. Ghost has lost the thing that has made him human and fun and enjoyable. Price is once again gonna go down that rage path, which was okay in the original trilogy, as will Gaz. And personally, it felt like, with the fact that all of the characters who had originally been killed off one by one in the original trilogy, them finally being together, and you get to see the 141 as the four-man amazing team that they are at the beginning of this game, plus obviously Farah, so 5-man team, 6-man if you're counting Alex, whatever. To then do this, personally, I felt like this franchise's story was going to move along the idea of these characters who didn't really get a chance to live through the original trilogy, to have them surpass their mentor. Price was their mentor, maybe not Ghost's direct in the original Modern Warfare series, but he was their mentor and their leader. And I felt narratively it would have been better to have had them actually live. And listen, Price, I love him. He's like my husband. I love him. But I would have been it felt like it would have made more sense narratively to kill him off, to let these characters really take on his mantle and his legacy and build something new for themselves. This was cutting Soap off at the roots. We don't get to see Captain McTavish. Listen, Season 4 literally just dropped for Modern Warfare 3 for multiplayer the day that I am filming this. It's waiting for me to pull up my game, start going at that battle pass. Yes, I paid for the battle pass, leave me alone. And it's focusing around a, new skin for Soap, a little thing for Soap, and I'm like, I don't care what hoops you have to jump through to bring him back. I'll take anything. I will take anything. And it just really extra hurts when they made it so abundantly clear that he was gone. That there's no way he's ever gonna come back like they did for Alex and Graves. It really is that knife in between the ribs and a twist. So while yes, this video is meant to talk about the veteran mode of these games and how they feel, I can't help but have my issues with the story, and I could spend hours going on more about it, but it's a rough time. It's a rough go. It hurt. It was And don't get me wrong, it's not just because he died. I can be okay with a character dying if it makes sense from a narrative standpoint. I am a Resident Evil fan. I love Borderlands. Many of my beloved characters have died in those two franchises. I'm not gonna spoil it, but they have died in those two franchises, and I have said, I've cried a little bit, then I said, okay, it makes sense narratively. I can understand why okay, I don't like that it had to happen, but I'm okay. I can understand and be okay with it eventually. Moving into the gameplay. Now, I already mentioned how a lot of it felt like a bit of a nothing burger. It definitely didn't feel as refined as Modern Warfare 2, obviously because of the time crunch. The new thing that Sledgehammer decided to try and do was open combat missions. Call of Duty, as I have been stating throughout this entire video, is a masterclass in terms of pacing. So when you give a player a little bit too much freedom, you definitely mess with that pacing. Whether you're slowing things down too much or jamming it up too fast, it's a problem. These open combat missions really played like the Spec Ops 2-player missions that you got to play in Modern Warfare 2, and they felt very unbalanced on veteran mode. On regular mode, yeah, you can breeze through this campaign 4 hours, I'm sure, yeah, no problem, but on veteran mode, it took me a lot longer. These open combat missions didn't nearly have as much quick saves, which, you know, fine. Okay, that's okay, fine. Sure, fine. I'm not gonna complain. You can call it a skill issue, whatever. So I had to repeat a lot and speed run through certain sequences when I died and had to redo them. Well, yes, it can be nice to have some versatility in how you want to attack a certain sequence or mission. We saw this handled very well in Black Ops 3. We saw this handled well in the stealth missions and others like in Cold War. We even saw it a little bit in Modern Warfare 2 with the Alone mission and how you wanted to tackle going through certain sequences, as well as the El Nombre mansion sequence. But this, it was like almost too much freedom that just really did feel like it was messing with it. Certain aspects of it felt like Farah's open combat mission and a little bit of Soap's open combat mission made a little bit more sense and were fairly enjoyable, but it did feel like it was too open, and I wish that they had pulled back the reins a little bit more and had made them a little bit tighter, like, once again, the Alone mission in Modern Warfare 2. While that mission does give you a lot of versatility in how you want to go about it. Do I use a trap here? Do I use a gun here? What risks do I want to take? I only have limited resources. It still is very linear, and there is still a fairly set path in how you should proceed through the level, whereas this is very all over the place. And I do, when I finally just feel a little bit better about it, maybe I will never, but probably won't. When I give this game a little bit more time, I will probably go back into it and play it on easier difficulties to try and get every single little weapon and every single little hidden secret, every single little dialogue. It just didn't have the same magic as Modern Warfare 2, and it was rough. It starts off very strong with breaking Makarov out of the gulag, and without really realizing that you're playing as the bad guys in the beginning, but it just fizzles in the middle with that one last poof in the end that really just hurt. Obviously, the zombies mode and multiplayer has been glitchy as heck through it, and with every single new update, it feels like something that gets fixed, that another thing gets broken, but we're talking primarily about story mission here. I didn't feel like it was crazy glitchy, but it wasn't as bad as Vanguard, but it certainly wasn't as crisp as Modern Warfare 2. Disappointing is probably the best way to describe this game. While certainly not the worst to play out of all of them, it was definitely rough. I definitely did not feel very jazzed as I watched those credits roll. And I really do hate to end this whole list of games on this. And perhaps, hopefully, when we do eventually get a Modern Warfare 4, I'm sure, maybe that game will be better. Maybe I will get to take back a lot of the issues that I had for this game and say, okay, this story mission, now it's paid off, or this element, or this or that. Oh, you know, this was their first attempt at open combat missions and it was rough, but now that we've seen it 2 or 3 or 4 games later and they've refined it, now they're fun. I hope that it's that way. I hope that Sledgehammer's issues of them introducing new stuff and it not being received as well initially, I hope I get to eat these words. I want to be proven wrong. I so desperately want to be proven wrong. With a related title, maybe not like, I don't wish to call upon the haters to disagree with me right now. Listen, it's okay. Like I've said, you don't have to agree with me. But it was pretty unanimous on the internet when a lot of people were having a hard time with this particular title. It just is really unfortunate that this was the Modern Warfare series and Slow Burn had been accumulating to from a narrative standpoint, and that this was the quality of multiplayer and other such gameplay and just general quality of everything. For this to be the 20th anniversary of such an iconic franchise in gaming in general, yeah. Maybe we should have stuck to that Black Ops title for 2023. It just means that Black Ops 6, you better be good. You got the longest development time. Modern Warfare 3 had to suffer. Black Ops 6 better be good. Don't worry, I'll put out a video after I play Black Ops 6 when that comes out. I'll put out a little video for you guys. So, I was gonna do an outfit change, but you know what? I've got momentum right now. I've got caffeine in my system. Let's wrap this up. Thus concludes me taking on the challenge of playing every single Call of Duty mainline game on veteran mode. I'm proud of myself. It was a rough ride. I enjoyed it from just studying the game development over the years of not just Call of Duty as a franchise and these studios themselves and these developers, but just also the way that these games have influenced FPS games in general. I mean, the original Call of Duty really did change the game, and all the way up until today, you can see, at least with titles like the 2023 Modern Warfare 2, you can see how gaming has really advanced in environment design, in NPCs, dialogues, and how games can really suck you in and endear you to characters or a storyline. I really love and look forward to playing these games with my friends every Monday. Even if we're grumbling through many glitches and zombies mode or so on, I still have a good time with them, and my COD squad is very near and dear to my heart. This was not just something out of curiosity, but it was also something for enjoyment, and I feel like I've come out of this a better gamer, without lack of a better phrase. I'm definitely much better at FPS and shooter games. While I was never new to them in the first place, dear Lord, no, further from the truth. But there is something to say about forging yourself, making yourself stronger through a little bit of pain. I mean, any sort of FromSoft game like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, or Elden Ring can certainly prove that as well. That is not something new. It was a challenge that, while yes, I broke a mouse, I still had a lot of fun in the end, cumulatively doing. Yes, there were a lot of parts and sequences that I severely struggled in games I didn't enjoy nearly as much as others. Overall, I still really had a good time, and I'm so proud of myself for doing this. I now have a shelf filled with all of my physical Call of Duty copies that I've been gradually showing off during this stream. Obviously, I haven't shown off all of them, like my Black Ops Declassified case or any of my 3DS games or so on. But I now have a shelf filled with Call of Duty physical games. What happened to me? What happened? It shares a shelf with my Resident Evil physical copy collection and is somehow bigger. I don't know. I used to definitely be a Call of Duty hater. Oh, they're all just the same. Oh, they're not that good. Everybody plays as bad. I'm a convert. Well, yes, these games are nowhere near perfect, and there is plenty that you can and should criticize. It was still a very fun, borderline year-long project of on and off gameplay. I certainly played plenty of other stuff in between these, but a good time. Do I recommend you do it? I mean, if you like pain, sure. But hey, if you're somebody who really loves Call of Duty and you've never done this, try it with your maybe favorite title. Revisit one of your favorites that you haven't played in 10 or so years and try it on a higher difficulty setting. You want to get better at multiplayer? Try playing it on veteran mode. I definitely am a lot better and more confident playing this game on multiplayer now that I've gone through all of this. There was a huge spike in skill, if I don't say so myself. And this could also be said about any of your favorite games. You really like Resident Evil? Try it on that harder difficulty. Any game, whether it's a shooter or not, it's a horror, it's even a lighter title that does have difficulty, give it a try. You might actually be surprised by just how good you are and how much you can succeed. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this incredibly long video. I really appreciate it. I hope it took me a lot longer to put together than expected, but we did it! If you're still here, please maybe give a subscribe or check out maybe my Twitch channel where I live stream games. Sometimes I occasionally live stream a Call of Duty, mayhaps. If you have a favorite Call of Duty or a least favorite Call of Duty, please tell me about it in the comments below. What were your thoughts on any of these campaigns, stories, or gameplay itself? Have you also played them on veteran mode, or have you played it on some of them have a notch higher on realism mode? Tell me about it. Talk to me about Call of Duty, please. Who's your favorite character? Who do you always play as in multiplayer? Are you a shotgun person or a sniper? I don't care. Let's chat. Thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully I will see you again for other shorter video game related video essays here. I promise I'm going to do something different with my camera. Maybe you also want to stick around for some cosplay content too. Bye cuties, and take care of yourselves more than I have taken care of myself.